How are you? Welcome to Critical Moves of Telesur. We are closing the week going over the conflict in Libya, a Libya that before and during the Gaddafi era was of the highest index of social development, but now is in a cul-de-sac after 9 years of war provoked by the invasion of NATO and all of the predatory elite governments that are after it. To what point has the government of a national coalition been solidified? What are both positions? Why are the hostilities still ongoing? This will be analyzing today. Let's begin. The known Cairo Initiative, that was a ceasefire from the last Monday, was rejected by the National Unity Coalition. The recent advance of the government comes after the Turkish government had signed an agreement with Tripoli that was a military agreement and that was left in taking Turkish army, and this in a war against Damascus. Our fight continues, and we are decided to defeat the enemy, to impose state control over all of the government, and do away with everybody who threatens our constitution. I am sending a message to the countries that support the aggression and that helped kill the Libyan and destroy the country. Your bet has lost, and we will show you this. We will be loyal to the blood of our martyrs. And from there, our decision of not sitting to the table with the criminal Hafka, who has never been an ally of the political peace process. The Turkish intervention in the Libyan conflict is increasing the polarization by supplying the unconstitutional government more weapons and mercenaries. The history will judge those who support Haftar has left Libya in a bloodbath. This initiative demands the respect of all of the efforts and international initiatives through an announcement of ceasefire from 6 hours of 2020, the parts of that will draw all of the mercenaries from Libya and dissolving the militias and turning in the weapons so the international army can come in and do with the military responsibilities of security. This also aims at having a fair representation for 3 Libyan regions in a presidential representation elected by the Libyan people with supervision of United Nations to govern Libya for the first time in history. We are with the Egyptian initiative. We are part of that initiative. We expected that the militia accept the ceasefire and go back to the table. But unfortunately, they did not agree, and they rejected the initiative. The military strategies are still ongoing, and we will not stop until all of the aggressions cease. Let's see a map of the situation in Libya after the explosion of war that was declared by NATO against Muammar Gaddafi over 9 years ago. Libya, a scenario of conflict. Almost 9 years after the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi by NATO forces, Libya is not able to recover itself from a war that has maintained themselves balkanized. This was one of the richest countries in the region, and it had the GDP the largest one in the continent. The arrival of the Arab Spring reduced everything to ashes. There is no central government, but there are 2 forces that are trying to be the only authority, additionally to a great number of tribal groups that dispute the local power. The first force is the Chamber of Representatives that is elected by election in 2014, but not recognized internationally. It is led by Khalifa Haftar, that on many occasions has tried to make control of the nation, which has allowed him to control over the majority of the territory, like Benghazi, Achibija, Derna, Sirt, Harawa, Norfalia, Sabah, Ubari, Nizla, Baniwali, Halu, Tukra, Abiyar, among others. The second force is the government of national unity, led by Isarah, that has its headquarters in Tripoli, and it was installed by United Nations as a high legislative camera with the aim of putting an end to the rivalry between both groups. However, with the passing of the years, this has been able to extend their functions up until having control over Sorma, Tahura, Sawiwe, Misurata, Kums, Abu Kwang, Gurayan, Saltan, Gumayal, Aziazia, Sultan, among others, which has put at the doubt its legitimacy. The Libyan economy is based on selling oil. However, in the last years, there has been no strategic project for the development of the country. According to analysts, the expectation that a change of government would bring democracy was a fraud. Neoliberal powers try to maintain the crisis in the country because what they want to do is take over the vast resources that it has in oil and in minerals. Let's go further on this last part. Why is Libya so desirable? Why does everybody want to have it? Why was Muammar Gaddafi ousted? When it's time to answer this, we must have to bear in mind the following. Libya is a country in the northern part of Africa. Their coasts are bathed by the Mediterranean Sea. To the west, it's Tunis and Algeria. To the south, Niger and Chad. In the southeast, they have Sudan, and to the east, Egypt. Very vast in extension, the capital is Tripoli. Until 2011, when there was a war against the President Muammar Gaddafi, who was assassinated by NATO, Libya had the longest life expectation in Africa. They also had the GDP highest in the continent. It had one of the largest register in the region in terms of human development. As one important piece, Libya has great resources of water, oil, and other minerals like potassium, and this is why their development was considered as a barrier for the recolonization. Their economy is based on oil. That is almost the totality of their exportation, a 95%. It is a founding member of OPEC, and this region has the largest hydrocarbon resources in the world. This is why Libya is considered like an oil zone that is highly desirable because of the quality of their oil, as well as the low costs in production, almost $1 per barrel in some camps. However, ever since NATO intervened, the country is now in chaos and fighting for the control of the hydrocarbons. Currently, the oil rigs, the south from Tripoli, are the most important ones and can produce 320,000 barrels a day. This is 1/3 of its total production. The recent years, there has been clashes between the Libyan army and the regional sources. This because of Total and Repsol that are taking over the reservoirs. Another topic is water, because American and French companies want to privatize the water production. This would strengthen Chad, Egypt, and Sudan. During the government of Gaddafi, there was going to be many developments, especially in water distribution. This was going to have huge tubes to transport water from the Sahara, from the south of the country, to the coast, where there is a concentration of most of the population. With the death of Gaddafi, this was frustrated. The government of Gaddafi had a policy of cooperation through the African Union. Ever since the blockade, he tried to support a unified currency for the continent that would be totally independent from the US dollar. He also destined some of the part of the selling of the oil to develop sub-Saharan governments such as Mali. There we have these background information that will allow us to expand on the information. Now let's see what have been the geopolitical strategies that allow to better understand what's going on. Here we have an informed Haftar of Libya will stay in Egypt until he finds a safe place to retire. The renegade general Khalifa Haftar will remain in Egypt, El Cairo, for at least some weeks until he finds a place where he can retire. This has been stated by Madam Masar, who says that about Libyan authority, saying that Haftar will not be totally displaced, but he will be in El Cairo with strict vigilance. Egypt has suggested a proposal that means a ceasefire that would open the way for a new political process in Libya. This was done after a reunion between Haftar and Abdel el-Sisi, the president of Egypt, after Haftar did not get the support that Sisi was required. And what does Prensa Latina say? The national coalition has had to retire their armies. The spokesperson of Libya said that they'd had to remove their forces. Khalifa Haftar had rejected the possibility of any negotiation with their opposers, while there are some Turkish troops in Libya. Both countries had accepted to negotiate a ceasefire and to open the way to find a pacific way out of this conflict. None of the parties have confirmed the information, and on the contrary, the National Agreement government, that is a recognized government, has accused their opposer of an attack that left 5 dead and many injured. Just some hours afterwards, there was a retaking of the forces, and with this, there will be a substantial change in the situation in Libya. And bearing in mind something that we spoke in one of our previous reports, I suggest you read an article that has been published by Telesur saying, what did Muammar Gaddafi do for Libya? This was published on June 7th, and it's also important to read it. And let's select some of the paragraphs. It says, Libya, during the government of Gaddafi, was an example for the Arab and African countries, as sad as Bassem Tajeldine said that during the 40 years of the mandate of Gaddafi, there was an advance in social, economic, and political fields that after the assassination in 2011 was totally lost. Then Libya was given in the 49 to the UK and France, and then there was a resolution that promoted the independence of Libya before 1952. London supported the appearance of a monarchy that was going to be done by Saudi Arabia. By 1963, the excavations of oil and gas began. However, this did not bring any benefit for the country. According to this article, Libya and the harsh reality, there used to be no universities, and the university graduates were only 16. There were only 2 lawyers and not a single doctor. doctor, engineer, pharmaceutical doctor in the whole country. Only 250,000 people of the 4 million knew how to read and write. Muammar Gaddafi led Libya since 1969 when he did away King Idris, and there was a revolution committee that declared the government Muslim and socialist. The Green Revolution, as it was known, started an agriculture reform that pushed forward a social security system, free medicine, and participation in the workers in the state's companies. Gaddafi advanced the social agenda by guaranteeing education, health, water. He also nationalized the oil company to distribute the earnings and construct roads and go forward with the social agenda. If a person from Libya had a piece of land, he would receive seeds, counseling, tools, and money from the government so they could start their work. The newlyweds received $50,000 to buy a house. Right now, Libya has 3 governments, 2 in the capital and 1 in Tobruk that domains the eastern regions. The armed conflict that is open since 2011 has done away with over 5,000 people. Almost 1 million have fled from their houses. The oil exportation have decreased 95%, and the loss in the GDP is $200 billion in the last years. According to number of Middle Eastern Monitor, Libya has been used by the mafia to transit and to move forward prisoners. You can find more information in this text that I'm just suggesting. Now let's go with Ms. Paretta, Janet Paretta. She is from El Cairo, informing. Thank you, colleague. Greetings from El Cairo. The co-relationship of forces in the Libyan conflict has changed in the past weeks after the constant failures of the Libyan army led by Haftar. Haftar lost all of the advance points in Tripoli and doing away with his offensive a year against the capital city, while the government of national agreement has recovered the national airport that in 2014 was the scenery of very harsh combats. And now Haftar was used to control other important places in the city. The government also recovered an air base where apparently 8 collective tombs were found and that are now being investigated by United Nations. Now the investigations and the combats are around the city of Sitra, which is door to many of the oil fields in the country. The withdrawal of the troops is part of a strategy, while al-Sarraj has said that his troops will take over all of the country. The leaders of both groups have fled to ally countries, and Mr. al-Sarraj reached Turkey, and they said that Turkey was going to increase the support to Tripoli in a cooperation that includes the seeking of hydrocarbon in the Mediterranean. The victories of a national agreement are due to the drones and the anti-missile defense systems that were provided by Ankara, who has also sent many mercenaries of Syria. Meanwhile, Haftar met with the president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and asked an ending of the Turkish intervention as the main condition to negotiate the peace. And from this meeting, there was the Cairo Agreement that included a ceasefire from last Monday that did not go through. This was also supported by European countries and Russia, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. Egypt has reiterated that they will not allow any threats on their borders, referring to the terrorist groups that they believe so, that support the government of national agreement, just like the Muslim Brotherhood. Another international actor that is very much present in this conflict is Russia, which has denied the rumors of their intentions to establish a military base in Libya and of having sent combat airplanes to that region and having supported mercenaries. And in terms of the European Union, it is clear that they have more concrete actions that are limited to the naval actions that are trying to go through with the embargo of weapons to Libya. Nevertheless, many boats and aircrafts are arriving with more and more weapons. In fact, just these days ago, there was a boat that arrived with many supplies, and the European Union says that they will investigate the consequences of these acts. We will follow what's going on here. Back to you. Thank you very much. Let's go to our first pause and critical moves, but let's not forget that we have the question of the day. You can participate with your opinion and being one of our correspondents. It says, in a limbo, the ceasefire in Libya, while the government of national agreement, supported by the United Nations, the forces of Khalifa Haftar deny the fact that he was had to give up. Give us your opinion on this. Let's go to a pause and we'll be right back. After the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya has worsened their situation. Let's see one of the highlights of these conflicts. In February 2011, there was a manifestation against the government promoted by Western forces like the United States leading this. There was a parallel government in the region, and the Security Council of the United Nations takes some sanctions against Libya, ignoring the United Nations Charter, and the West declared war on them. In March of that same year, the International Penal Court asked to investigate Muammar Gaddafi for alleged war crimes, and there was a capture order. The confrontation of the army and the opposers were getting worse and worse. On the days of 19 and 20 of May, United States launched 110 Tomahawk missiles. The then President Barack Obama ordered to begin the war actions of that nation. The armed opposition went against the African countries with mercenary and finance of the West. The European Union dictated sanctions against Gaddafi, and the African Union recognized him as the only president in Libya. In September, the General Assembly of United Nations recognized a transformation government. On October 20, NATO went through with the assassination because Gaddafi was abandoning Sirte, his hometown, and he was injured during a bombarding in the caravan where he was mobilized. Then he was captured by the opposition, lynched and assassinated. His body was taken to Mizraha on October 31. And the operation was closed after knowing that Gaddafi had been assassinated by mercenaries of the U.S. The then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton expressed her happiness. We came, we saw, and he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, I'm sure it did.
With the death of the Green Revolution, there was a long civil war that goes on to this day. The government has been balkanized, divided in two parts. One the headquarters in Tobruk, and led by Khalifa Haftar, and the other one with the headquarters in Tripoli that is taken over, supported by United Nations, and led by Fayez Sarraj. Let's begin the analysis, and we have Pablo Onofre, an expert in international relationships, and from Spain we have Juan Luis González Pérez, expert in the Middle East and North of Africa. I want to greet you both to our program. Pablo, let's begin with you. We see here how the positions are being marked. Khalifa Haftar in Egypt, consulting with Assisi, while Sarraj in Turkey, consulting with Erdogan about the future of this country that up until now is balkanized. And there is a ceasefire that is still in the limbo. How do you see all this? Well, yes, there is a ceasefire. Oh, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me. And this is a ceasefire that is unilateral. It's not, it hasn't been proposed by one of the parties. Let's not forget that previous to this announcement of this intention to call to a ceasefire, Haftar and the other in the position has also met with their forces and their supporting countries, so they could orient the upcoming steps. Ever since April of last year, they became the offensive on behalf of Haftar. There had been many forces and territories that were in the hands of this government in Tobruk. So, therefore, what's happening now is to recover the territories that they had lost in the offensive of Haftar. To call a ceasefire means on Haftar's position means that there might be a restarting their position. There is no intention, no real intention of a ceasefire or to call on peace or negotiate a national agreement that would allow the belligerent forces to establish the ceasefire in the zone. It is just simply to restart and have better perspectives of action and have strategic alignment. Let's not forget that these forces, they're both powerful, but they're totally different. Of course, some of these have United Nations recognition, but those who recognize Haftar, on the other hand, there are also NATO and European countries, like the case of France. In the case of Tripoli is Greece, Turkey, Qatar, and there is a division that makes it possible, that it makes it impossible until they come to an agreement. Let's not forget that there are many just actors that are nothing more than puppets. And in Tripoli, we have an Italian country, and we have Total from France, and the governments that come behind them. And those who finance and allow on the cease of using weapons. If Haftar and al-Sarraj, we are speaking of the visible figures, but we must focus on those who have led Libya to this crisis. Well, thank you very much, Pablo. Please stay with us. There are two elements here that we must highlight when analyzing a possible solution of this conflict. And the following question goes to Juan Luis. Juan Luis, one of these two elements is CIRT. This would be the cherry on the ice cream. And why is CIRT so transcendent as it is now. Well, I want to greet Ray and Pablo. But, well, when the counteroffensive began, what they do first is to liberate the people around Tripoli and basically the airport. Then they have continued to the south, and they have liberated, or they have retaken, a military base that was built by the United States after World War II. And their direct objective, where they are focusing all of their powers, is to Sirte, because that is the key to the oil fields. So right now, in the surroundings of Sirte, there have been people circling all of this. And some days ago we were surprised because one of the convoys that arrived to Sirte was attacked by MiG-29s, and it was practically destroyed. And they were airplanes that were given by Russia to the Tobruk government. Many say that this may not be so. So right now they have a stake here. And this is because it could balance a lot the power that they have. And it also seems that most of the drones that are being used are Turkish, and that they're falling very easily. Apparently they have been distributed there have been many anti-missile weapons against these drones. It has also been announced that that in the south another city has fallen, and that Haftar is having difficulties in maintaining the regions he had conquered in the past years. So right now, the main objective of the government of Tripoli is to do away with Sirte and to recover Sirte. And like Pablo said, well, Egypt is also playing their cards, and they're preparing a big offensive, and that fundamentally with tanks, and they will not allow these groups to lose more territories. So right now, the swords are lifted, and let's see what happens in the upcoming days. Thank you, Juan Luis. Pablo, the other element that we see from here, and that is highlighted, and that could decide the advance of one or either force, is the factor of the Muslim Brotherhood, because one of these two groups are trying to stop this ideology, while the other one considers that they should impose the Muslim Brotherhood. I know that you have all of the theory in this, and I would like to hear it from you. Ray, I think that there are maximum contradictions about the support and combat to the Muslim Brotherhood, because the main movement that supports the national agreement is the Muslim Brotherhood. And this is a recognized government by the United Nations, where you have Greece behind it, Italy. These are members of the European Union that at the same time are enemies of this political Islam. Let's not forget that the hit against the Muslim Brotherhood was organized by those who are afraid of this political organization. But when it comes to gas and oil interests, and being so strategic like Libya, and elements that are so strategic of the control of the Maghreb and the Sahel, this topic can be overlooked. And what we know is that Egypt is afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood. So in this context, all of the support to Haftar goes in the line is led to create a stop to the political Islam to the west, to the east, to the border with Egypt. Egypt does not want to have problems with the Muslim Brotherhood. They already had it from Mr. Sisi and those who are afraid of this Islam. And in this sense, the fact that they are supporting it through governments of Italy and Greece and the European Union, Turkey, and at the same time Qatar, Tripoli means that there's a support to the Muslim Brotherhood, and they make them an immediate enemy. So this Muslim Brotherhood generates fear in the countries that have the possibility of destabilizing and to have a no control. Egypt is a clear example. Egypt is a country that for decades lived under the power of three governments. However, the West never made any problem about it. But now that the Muslim Brotherhood is here, and there is a coup d'etat against this Muslim government, so behind all of this is not just against their ideology. There's a fear of destabilizing those governments that are more inclined to the West. This is why I say that there is a contradiction. We see that the Muslim Brotherhood does support Tripoli. So beyond ideology are the central elements: oil, gas, the Mediterranean, the control of maintaining a French control strip from the port all the way to the Atlantic, and the influence that France has in this area, and to maintain the status quo on the gas exploitation of France, the fourth biggest in their field, and Emi on the side of Tripoli, one of the largest in the world in terms of energy. So beyond the political Islam, I think that it's an excuse, and is what at the bottom of it has to do with the usurpation of the gas and oil resources that they have. Thank you, Pablo. In just a couple of minutes, Juan Luis, I would like to tap into the way how this conflict has spread to the neighboring country, because conflict doesn't stay within your borders. Niger, Chad, Tunisia. Yes, in fact, like Pablo said, the fact that supporting the political Islam, let's not forget that the Muslim Brotherhood was apparently who was going to be benefited after the supposed Arab Spring. This does not stop here in Libya. Obviously, Egypt is afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood. Europe must fear the Muslim Brotherhood because Al-Qaeda and the Muslim states have shown their power, and most of them are terrorists that were in the north of Syria, and they have been taken by Turkey to reinforce the government of Tripoli. But we cannot forget that United States and NATO have Argelia in their eye, that of course that has a lot of petroleum and gas and has independence from the empire, and one of the roles that Russia is playing to support the government of Haftar, and the government of Tripoli doesn't control the government, is to have a protection line towards Algeria that is still independent from the United States, and that has an alliance with Russia that is fairly interesting. So what happens in Libya is something that we still don't know. And there is a destabilization. And with the upbringing of the extreme left, there has been, in many countries, there have been appearance of these groups. These are the ones that have appeared, have been mercenaries. Thank you very much, Juan Luis. I want to also thank Pablo Nofre for your time to Critical Moves. See you soon. Let's go to our pause. As you may recall, we have the question of the day, so you can give us your opinion. And it says, the ceasefire in Libya is in a limbo, while the national agreement of the government that is supported by United Nations advances in the territory. Forces of Haftar denies to give in. Who continues profiting from the balkanization of this African nation? Let's continue making context in this long civil war where important Western countries have taken positions. Let's see this. The government of national agreement led by Sarraj has a recognition of the United States, Turkey, and the European Union, although there are differences between France and Italy, have made it difficult to have a single posture, while Tobruk government is supported by Khalifa Haftar, who was at first an ally of Gaddafi and then became his opposer, and he is supported by Egypt, Russia, and the Emirates. This has brought forward many structures of control, security, oil systems, central banks that compete for the control of the resources of this country. At the beginning of this year, Berlin took an international conference that had the agreement of not interfering in the Libyan government, but was not able to have a cease in the hostilities between Sarraj and Khalifa Haftar. Let's go back to the analysis. Now we have from Qatar, Rafael Qatar. He's a professor in Islamic studies. Rafael, as always, it's a privilege to have you here in our program. The question is, do you think that the conflicts in Libya will last as long as their resources do? Well, the conflict in Libya began due to the interest in their natural resources and what is known as the Western Mediterranean after the loss of the European forces in Europe there. It has been a battlefield for all of the resources they have, mainly by Russia and Turkey, that have clearly displayed the European Union and the United States itself. Just recently, an agreement with Erdogan in Ankara, they have agreements to take over the water gas. And this has been seen a violation on behalf of Turkey. The conflict in Libya will continue just because of the resources, but also because of the difficulty to generate a political consensus in its very fragmented territoriality of the whole country. Rafael, what are the factors that have been an influence to stop this political process that you speak about? Excuse me? I asked you, what are the elements that have stopped this political process in Libya? Well, the main factor that has been an obstacle, it has been that have been the external forces. Russia, Egypt, Turkey, United Emirates, who have empowered and given weapons to this group, and they have been, this is a civil war, what we're seeing here. But along with this, there's another factor that we cannot lose eye of, which is the deterioration of the country after Muammar al-Gaddafi. Because one of the main achievements of Gaddafi was to attain the consensus of all of the tribes in Libya. Libya is very divided. There are many types of loyalty. There are tribal structures, and many times it goes beyond the international analysis. The type of intertribal communication was lost, and apparently there is no new process that might coordinate the intertribal communication. Nowadays, if there is some interest to attain a consensus, the great majority of the political actors in both fields are against the political process, because what they want is revenge, and they remember the compensation laws. That is a tribal structure. This impedes any type of consensus. This is why the national agreement, after their victory, where Khalifa Haftar tried to take over Tripoli, now there is a sensation of victory on behalf of Tripoli, and that they want to advance further to the east and take over the lands that Haftar is controlling. So there is not a there's not a real consensus. Rafael, you were speaking of a world civil war, where external factors would have the deciding voice. And I ask myself, what is the role of the African Union? Why has it not been stronger, their intervention and their decisions in regards to Libya? Does this have to be on the dependency that the other regions of Africa have historically on these foreign powers that are now showing the destiny, the path to go? Well, this is just what you're saying. There is a total dependency, especially of the countries who are leading the destiny of these countries, like the UK and France, even Niger, that could have their own voice in Libya. However, these countries were just benefited by the money that Libya had. But there is another element that's very important. All of the migratory movement that has been so heightened and that crosses by Sahel and Mali, that goes all the way to the Mediterranean, this would be left to the tribes in the south of Libya and the governments on the west and east. So Africa has this ambiguous position on how to impose a political decision on this divided territory. So what do we have in front? Is there a political solution? Well, we see it further every time. And this is because none of the leaders can call to a national unity, because the other part wants vengeance. So the opportunity that this government has now is that we may have a divided country led by foreign powers, and that is why we call it a civil world war. Hello, Rafael. The fact that this conflict is might make a definite separation of Libya. Might this be because the world is putting its eyes on something else, like COVID-19? And would this change the way of government of the world itself? Well, yes, I agree. We have commented in another program, because the pandemic of COVID-19 has made that many of the traditional forces have been displaced and have taken this distance. And now there are other important characters. For example, Emirates and Russia also have these countries that have a new type of interference in the country. They are not supporting the state nation. On the contrary, they see it as beneficial to support local authorities, and they could then maintain themselves as autonomous. And this is why I see it a line, a divisive line. And this has been even heightened because of the COVID-19. And here we see the different role of the state that doesn't have all of the interference, all of the control that they would like. Rafael, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. See you next time. Thank you, Ray. See you next. Let's go to our conclusions. A stall in the ceasefire between the self-proclaimed Haftar government and Sisi. Are they in a cul-de-sac where the only one who wins is who from outside is pushing for this war? Leaders in Africa a decade ago, and now devastation, where you can only speak the language of the oil. This is what Libya is today, and apparently will keep on being, while the responsible of the world order does not put aside their private interests, and they try to put order for 9 long years. This is all for today. Thank you.